10 players, 10 Auburn Tigers that are ready to take that big step forward after A-Day.
Well, Zach, I actually just finished crushing some chicken farm, and I am freaking ready to rock and roll.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. And it's Monday, so we are joined by the one and only Lindsay, Crosby, host of Locked On MLB Prospects, also a writer at auburndaily.com. There's a lot of upside on this team. We talked about it last week with Auburn being a top 10 team on the ESPN FPI. Is that legitimate or not? Probably not. But I do think you can look at this team and pick out a little bit of upside throughout the roster. So fun enough, we decided to both bring a list of 5. Your list may have 6, but 5 or 6 folks that we think can take a big step after seeing what they did last weekend in A-Day. And I think we should just kind of jump into it, Lindsay. My first one is Malcolm Johnson Jr. I think his ability to bring explosive play, or at least the threat of having an explosive play on the outside of the field, is something this team has been missing for a long time. Even when they had the guy that could do it, Anthony Schwartz, they didn't really use Schwartz in that way. It seems like this team understands what they have with Malcolm Johnson Jr., and that excites me. They went to him early and often in A-Day, and I think he has a chance to really help this offense stretch the field, because they will so desperately need that to help take Bixby in the running game in 2022.
Yeah, I'm kind of picking up on a theme here, because I also had this thing in there where I picked a wide receiver as well. It's something, when you've lost as many guys as they have out of this room, and you saw last year, obviously you bring in Demetrius Robertson to kind of be your number one, doesn't work out this way the way you think it's going to be. There's definitely playing time there. There's definitely stuff. I think Malcolm Johnson Jr. is going to be a good addition to this team. The guy I had as, and this is in no particular order, this is just, kind of random here.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. The guy that I had was Tavares Dawson. And when you go back and you watch A-Day, for the receivers that were on the field, he leads the receivers in targets with 5, receptions, 3 for 28. He had a deep ball they almost connected on for a touchdown, which is that aspect you haven't seen a lot of. And he even gets a carry for 7 yards. And so between Malcolm Johnson Jr. and Tavares Dawson, I feel like you have 2 guys that can be more explosive than you've seen in recent years from this Auburn team as far as getting their hands on the ball, and just something that this offense needs as an extra dimension.
Auburn's leading receiver last year, Kobe Hudson, had 580 yards receiving last year. Do you think Tavares Dawson or Malcolm Johnson Jr. go over that number?
One of them will. I just don't know which one.
You think the leading receiver has more than Kobe did last year?
I think the leading receiver has more than Kobe did last year, because I'm expecting, number of catches, it's probably going to be close, but I'm expecting a couple of those deeper balls to pad the numbers a bit. If you take Kobe Hudson's line and you give him one 70-yard pass, it looks dramatically different. And so I expect whoever's the number one, whether it's Johnson or Dawson, to have a similar line as far as number of catches, but they'll have 1 or 2 deep shots that'll probably push them over that yardage total.
Yeah, interestingly enough, according to ESPN, the top 3 receivers all average 13.2 yards per catch. Kobe Hudson, Cedric Jackson, Demetrius Robertson. The only thing that changed was the amount of catches that each of them had. So that's something worth noting as we kind of talk about this upcoming season. And of course, Cedric Jackson was number 2 on the team last year with 527. Are people too low on him? I don't know. But, I think we're all pulling for him. No question about it. My number 2, and once again, no particular order, but the second guy I have on this list is Owen Papo. And so I know a lot of people are going to be hearing like, well, what? He's already a really good player. I was listening to The Drive with Bill Cameron last week, and Jason Caldwell with Inside the Auburn Tigers was on there. And he talked about how Owen has the opportunity. He's essentially been acting as a coach on the sideline ever since he's been injured. He's been very involved and active on the sidelines. He just obviously can't play due to that ankle shakeup. So going throughout spring, he's been very involved with his team as much as he can be without playing. Is there going to be an added element to Owen Papo's game going into 2022? First off, this will be the first time he hasn't gone through spring in several years, essentially since he started playing football. Is his body more fresh? And also the mental side of it. Will he be able to understand how to implement exactly what the defensive coordinator wants him to do and his defensive coaches want him to do? I thought it was an interesting argument. I'm not fully in on it. I do think some things matter. I do think reps matter. But with Owen, he has the physical ability, assuming he gets that confidence back in that ankle and he's able to do what he needs to do. But I've kind of thought a weakness of his game was kind of scheme related. What part of the field am I responsible for in pass coverage situations? And so maybe now that he's kind of been able to see the game from a different light, possibly Lindsay, and tell me if this is a reach, but maybe he can take a step forward in 2022.
I think the biggest thing for him is, just maybe a better understanding of what everybody's doing in the defense and how the offense is trying to attack you. So this time, and when you first said Owen Papo, I was kind of thinking, what else can he do? But then you laid it out really well.
I felt dirty writing it down.
Yeah, but you laid it out really well. Just a better understanding, like a more of a holistic understanding of what the entire defense is doing versus just what his job is or his assignment. And those guys that have that awareness, you see them be able to freelance when they need to, when they can pick up on something that the defense isn't adjusted right for. That's an element to his game I'd love to see added. And it's kind of coincidental you had Papo there, because the next on my list, which is in no particular order, I actually had linebacker as well, but cheated a little bit here. I've got both Wesley Steiner and Cam Riley. They were the two first-team linebackers for A-Day. Riley had 5 tackles and a sack for a loss of 9. Steiner had 6 tackles. And it's something where one of those two guys is going to be the new second linebacker next to Owen Papo. And I'm a little bit cheating here because I don't quite know which one it is, but I think both of them.
I think it's Cam Riley, Lindsay. I think Cam Riley will be a starter.
I think it's Cam Riley as well, but I wanted to hedge my bet there just a little bit. But still, like same thing where a guy who has now had more chances to play with the ones, play in front of that line, and understands a little better because of firsthand experience now what the defense is trying to do. And then, Cam Riley absolutely has the size to be impactful. 6'5", 230. We've heard good reports about what he's done in the weight room, good reports as far as workouts. And you saw it on that sack. He made a good play to get that sack. And so a guy I definitely think is going to be able to have an impact at a high level coming out of A-Day with the increased reps with the first team that he got.
Yeah. And they'll probably both be technical starters. I mean, I think
a lot of oars in the depth chart there.
Well, I'm pretty sure they listed Chandler Wooten as a starter last year, even when they started in nickel. I think they had 12 defensive starters. They had a third linebacker and a nickel starter. I think that's how they did it last year. So I'd be curious to see if they do that again. And if I'm remembering that wrong, somebody correct me. All right, the next guy on my list, Lindsay, I'm going to compare him to some of the guys coming out of college football and entering the NFL draft because I think his measurables are that good and that special. More on that in just a moment. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Built Bar is the protein bar that looks and tastes like a candy bar. There's really not a whole lot to not like about this. You go to built.com, you check out all the flavors that they have, and they have something for everyone. Blueberry muffin was one that my mother-in-law's in town. She came down. I was like, hey, can I have a Built Bar? I'm like, absolutely. She pulled out the blueberry muffin. And little different. It's not my favorite, but if you like the fruitier type of flavors mixed with the chocolate, it's still very, very good. So check them all out. They all contain about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. They keep you full. Check it out at built.com. Use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off. That is at built.com. Also, want to give some love to our friends at Fetch Me Home Delivery. They can bring food or groceries or anything you need. Just go to fetchmedelivery.com. You'll see a long list. They've got a ton of different partners, both with chain stores and other local businesses throughout the Auburn, Opelika, and Lee County community. So be sure to check that out. And also, they are now taking advantage of the new laws passed for alcohol delivery in the state of Alabama. So be sure to check that out at fetchmealcohol.com. It's straightforward. It's very simple and easy to use. They've got vendors growing by the day and products growing for more and more things to check and make sure it's delivered safely right to your door. So fetchmedelivery.com or fetchmealcohol.com to check out our local friends at Fetch Me. Lindsay Crosby, our guest today. My third person I want to mention that could take a huge step from last season to the 2022 season, Killian Zaire. I think he's going to be the starting left tackle. Seems like he's really, really impressed his coaching staff in spring camp. And look, it's just a new name. It's a new starter that I didn't really understand why he hasn't been in the mix since he stepped foot on campus. I think he was brought in to do that by Gus Malzahn. But I wanted to just mention this. So he's listed at 6'7", 312 on Auburn's website right now, which is very tall, which is very large.
Yes.
But I wanted to go through, and these are the top 5 offensive tackles in this year's draft kind of consensus. Evan Neal is 6'7", 360, same height, much larger. Like, that is huge. That's too big. They'll lean him up once he gets drafted. Akeem Akonwu is 6'4", 325. Similar size there. Mm-hmm. Charles Cross, 6'5", 312. Trevor Penning, 6'7", 321. That's the closest comp. And then Darian Kennard, 6'5", 345. So, I mean, all of these dudes that have all this upside that the NFL wants has the measurables that Zaire has. I think Zaire could get a little bigger, a little thicker as far as, the overall weight to match that 6'7", which wouldn't shock me if he started the first game at 6'7", 320. Like, that just wouldn't shock me.
Right.
They can do that with a 6'7" frame over the course of a few months, but he's got all the upside in the world. The only concern I have is, why did it take so long for him to get on the field? And to me, it's like, was he given a fair shake? Do they need other guys to kind of open up in front of him? Like, I don't fully know what that means, but I think as a left tackle, he could take a huge step forward for this team going into next season.
Yeah, and he's a guy that, I mean, like you said, massive size, prototypical size. And if I remember right, the whole being from Germany thing, if I understand it correctly, he hadn't been playing football for like all growing up. So it's a little bit of a technique thing, probably learning a bit, making sure he's fundamentally sound before you throw him out there.
Like a Winogo kind of situation. Exactly.
Physical marvel. We make sure he's fundamentally correct before we throw him out there to survive. But top-rated JUCO guy for a reason. So I feel good about him. Talking about massive size, my next guy is defensive lineman Jason Jones, a transfer from Oregon.
Big boy.
6'6", 328.
Wow.
That is a load. That is thick with 2 C's, if you were checking.
Yes.
And watching A-Day. Now, defensive line stats from A-Day, not really going to pay a lot of attention to them because you had so many guys out from the first team offensive line.
Right.
But just watching what he did, he looked way more athletic than somebody of that size has any right to be. There's probably some sort of law about that somewhere. And so he's a guy where I feel like he's in that Tony Fair nose tackle like assumption that everybody has.
Yeah.
Like he's like, oh yeah, he's going to fill this role.
He moves better than Tony Fair does.
I was about to say, he moves better than Tony Fair, and I would expect, and this is not a comparison, I am not saying he is this guy. I would expect a game more along the lines of a Derek Brown than I would a Tony Fair, simply because of his athleticism, how quickly he can move. He's not just going to be a guy like a Tony Fair who's going to get there and stand up 2 linemen and just make a wall. He's going to be able to split a gap, get in the backfield, penetrate, and do damage back there. So I expect him he's more athletic than I thought he was. And so I expect him to have a big year this year based off what we saw on A-Day.
That's a good one. Thank you. My next guy is he's an absolute unit. Eku Leota. Can't go a full show without mentioning him. But last year, Eku's stat line was 10 tackles for loss and 7 sacks on the season. And I think the vast majority of people would say he will do more than that this year.
I would, yeah.
I think he's going to get more opportunity because he came on later, and we talked about that when the absolute unit himself came on the show. But, it took him a little bit, and he talked about how huge it was to finally be on campus and actually participating in a spring. Like, that's a big deal. And I just think the impact of the guys that'll be next to him will have on, blocking schemes and things like that. Like Derek Hall, you can't double team him. You can't double team Colby Wooden. If Jason Jones has the impact that you're talking about just a second ago, I mean, there's so many different guys up front. Marquise Burks is another one. I mean, there's just so many dudes that, another guy like that we just don't talk about, probably should have put him on this list, Kevius Walker. Like we're just not talking about guys like that, but it's just, they're so deep and they're so athletic and explosive. Their first step on most of these guys is really, really fun to see and get excited about. And so I just think these one-on-one situations that he's going to constantly be seeing on the edge for Eku Leota, I think it's going to be really, really good. So, you talk about increasing those stat numbers right there. I mean, 10 tackles for loss, 7 sacks last year. If he doesn't get double-digit sacks this season, I would almost be pretty underwhelmed by what he does, unless he just really impacts the game as far as pressure and things like that. But yeah, I think he's going to take a huge step forward.
And it's awful coincidental that you picked edge right there, because my next guy is also an edge. I've got defensive lineman Dylan Brooks.
There you go. Okay.
So he's a guy where, as the number 3 edge, he's going to play a ton, especially when we know we only have 3 scholarship edge guys as of right this second when we're recording. So you
maybe
look at him,
Joko Willis. Maybe he's there a little bit. Maybe. Yeah,
I mean, he did almost get a sack in A-Day. I think that's probably where he's going to end up getting moved, partly a numbers game at linebacker, numbers game at edge. But yeah, so had 5 tackles at A-Day. But the thing is, 6'4", 232, he's got room. Like, it's a projectable frame. One of the things we do on my show a lot, Locked On Movie Prospects, we talk about these young players and how they can add weight in a safe and effective way. He's a guy that he can easily put on 10, 15 pounds of muscle over the course of his college career. But as he is right now, impressive athleticism. He's got a very quick first step, can bend around the edge. And so I think he's going to get enough play where he's going to be probably the breakout player on the line, simply because he goes from not playing at all last year to what will essentially be starter reps. Just having watched him at 8, I think he'll be impressive.
My biggest thing, I definitely agree with you on the ability. My only pause with a guy like Dylan Brooks is you have 2 dudes. If you're Auburn, if you're Bryan Harsin and Jeff Schmedding, you got to look at Eku and Hall and be like, man, kind of blessed to get these guys another year. You know what I mean? Like, both of those guys could have gone to the league. And I just wonder what the split is when you take those guys off the field. And in running downs, are both of those guys going to be on the field, or will you take one of them off? I mean, so there's going to be a lot of moving parts, I think, especially because you have so much depth and different role players on that defensive front, like a Kevius Walker. Do you scoot Colby Wooden out to end to put Jason Jones and Marquis Gilbert in the middle? Like, I mean, there's a bunch of different things that you could do in rushing defense situations.
Right.
So I don't know about Dylan Brooks as far as, like, is he going to get enough? Like, is he going to get a large enough piece of the pie at that rotation to really make an impact? But I also think you can make the argument, like, if he gets 4 sacks this season, that's tremendous. If he's getting as few reps as I'm thinking he's going to get.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, all the upside in the world. I mean, some of the videos that we've seen from spring practice, he does not look like a redshirt freshman. Like, he is a fully developed hunk of a man. And yeah, I mean, he looks like a Marine out there.
Yeah. And part of my thought process there too is having as little depth as you do at edge is when you get to some of these games, like some of these early season games where you maybe want to be mindful of the health. You have lower snap counts for some of these guys like a Hall and a Leota, and you have more snaps for a guy like a Brooks or a Willis. And so part of it's that, part of it's rotating in for a drive, first half drive or 2 second half kind of thing like that. I see your point as far as the starter snaps, but I think he's going to do well.
Yeah, I do too. And I mean, the SEC is throwing it more than ever. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially when you go to Mississippi State, when you go to Ole Miss, we don't really know what LSU's doing yet. But you got to.
Does LSU know what LSU's doing yet?
Fair enough. Some of the reports coming out of their camp is wild. It is crazy. So Missouri's probably going to pass it a good bit to talk about some of the early games. So no,
South Carolina will.
Yep. You're absolutely right. My last guy is Marquis Gilbert. He almost got himself an interception in the 8A game on TJ Finley, which a big chunk of the Auburn fan base loves bringing that up, by the way. Like they got that one ready to go. Like anytime somebody says anything good about TJ Finley at 8A, they're like, well, he should have thrown a pick. And it's like, well, the guy that should have picked it off was Marquis Gilbert. So, but the fact that we've heard and seen so much from him day one is exciting. Mm-hmm. I think there's an open door for the safety spots outside of Donovan Kaufman, I believe. And the fact that he got as much play as he did, I think you got to think some of the pitching, the sales pitch to get him on campus was, hey, we need you right away. And so Marquis Gilbert's my last one to watch.
And on that similar note, I also had a guy from the defensive backfield. Quick question for you, Zach. What's your favorite bridge?
I don't know a whole lot of bridges, so I will go with the Golden Gate Bridge.
Okay, why?
It reminds me of Caden Bridges.
There you go. That's actually coincidentally.
It's large and beautiful.
That's coincidentally my next pick. Not my favorite bridge, by the way. The state route 520 floating bridge in Seattle, Washington is my favorite bridge. Longest floating bridge in the world.
Really?
Yes. 7,700 feet. You drive across it. Anyway. So
is that one you would compare Caden Bridges to?
I mean, he's strong enough where you can. Yeah, I don't have a thing here. This is you and Charlie's bit. It's fine. But no, yeah. So Caden Bridges. I mean, yeah. I like the size, right? I mean, you look at him 6'2", just over 200. Good size for a downhill safety. You saw him run with the ones plenty during spring, and like you said, kind of an open door there at safety outside of Donovan Kaufman. I think Zion Puckett missed some time, some stuff like that. Had 3 tackles at A-Day, and he only played in 3 games last year. I believe he still has a red shirt. He
only played in 3 games. Yeah.
Yeah. The website has him listed as a sophomore, but I think he redshirted anyway. But just a thing where he's gotten plenty of experience, and he went from special teams only to the first team in the span of one offseason. And so that kind of tells me that even if he's not ultimately one of the starters there at safety, he's going to rotate in quite a bit. He's going to be a useful piece. And if he doesn't win that safety battle and get to start, first time somebody goes down due to injury or ineffectiveness, he's probably the next man up.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we said a second ago, I mean, the SEC passes it a ton. There's going to be a ton of different things that happen as far as defensive back personnel. So those are our 10/11 guys to kind of keep an eye on. We think those guys are ready for a big step after 8A going into 2022. All right. Auburn baseball. Craziness. Crazy series. We'll talk about that in just a moment here on Locked On Auburn. But first, betonline.net. They're your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. You can check it all out at betonline.net. They're your continued source for sporting wagering information from live betting, the playoffs, esports, and more. You can head to their website today, or you can use their mobile device. It's very easy to use. It is BetOnline, where the game starts. Lindsay Crosby, before we jump into the Auburn baseball action, what all do you have going on in your world right now that people can check out?
So, Locked On MLB Prospects is my show, the number one daily minor league baseball show. Love that. It's available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. You can follow it at Locked On Farm on Twitter. We're doing a mailbag tomorrow. Got some great stuff coming up this week. You can also check out the Auburn baseball writing at auburndaily.com and the merch at aushirts.com, where we have our Thick King himself has created and has a shirt for first baseman Sonny Chara.
Yep. Best-selling shirt. So yeah, check that out at aushirts.com. Sonny gets way more of the money than we do. So yeah, check that out. aushirts.com. Lindsay Crosby, where should we start with all the action that happened this weekend?
Wild series. I think before anything, we need to talk about the game 1 loss, because a lot of people, and I've seen this both. Yes, I've seen this in our Discord. I've seen this on Twitter. I had somebody hop into our Twitter space on Saturday night to ask about this because that's something we decided to do kind of spontaneously. Is we did a Twitter space Friday night, Saturday night.
It was fun.
It was tons of fun. Started at the 7th inning. It was a great time. So Auburn, game 1, has a lead going into the 9th. Blake Burkhalter pitched the 8th, did well. In the 9th, we have a defensive error on a double play ball. We intentionally walk a guy to get the force on, and then a pass ball scores a run. Another walks it off for Mississippi State. And a lot of people are bothered. A lot of people are upset. It's like, oh, Auburn choked. Auburn collapsed. I'm of the opinion, and so is Butch Thompson from his post-game comments, if you replay that game, 9 out of 10 times Auburn wins that game. Auburn followed the strategy that we have seen work in so many games.
People aren't arguing that, though. That doesn't, to me, that makes it more of a choke, more of a total collapse, right?
So it all comes back to the double play ball to Cole Foster, and he fields the ball, drops it on the transfer. We don't get either out.
You could tell, though, as soon as he got it, he's like, I have a double play. We're about to win this. You could see it.
Yes.
And then just the feeling leaves his eyes. And it's like, oh.
He had hit a home run, I think, in the 7th.
Gosh,
he was feeling it. The loudest hitter on the planet was feeling it. He was in a groove. That's not a typical error for Auburn. This is something where, and the point of contention I have with this is people are saying, oh, this is the same old Auburn. This is just Auburn being Auburn. We're not a good team. We're a good team.
Yeah.
We had a bad inning. And everything went according to plan. We asked Butch about this after the game, and he said, I can't think of anything I'd do differently. I mean, if I had to do it all over again, there's not a lot I'd like to change. Like we've played this game over and over and have found a way, just not tonight. And so that happens. Auburn comes back. Game 2 is not great. Auburn has a chance late to tie it up, score some runs. The rally kind of falls short, and they end up losing. And the frustrating thing about this, and this is kind of emblematic of the whole series, is, and this is, again, straight from Butch Thompson, that was one of Trace Bright's better starts of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the better outings that he's had this year. He gives up 2 runs early, pretty much shuts him down from that point on. And it kind of comes back to what we've talked about before about game 1, when you use Carson Skipper and Blake Burkhalter for 3 or 4 innings, you don't have a reliever out of the bullpen that you trust in game 2. We've seen this now a couple times. And part of me wonders, now that we've seen Joseph Gonzalez, like he went 8 innings in game 3. This week, he went 9 innings in game 3 last week.
He's on it, man.
He's on it. He's clearly our best pitcher right now. And so I'm beginning to wonder, because you have this glaring strategic issue of no reliever you trust in game 2, because you use both of them in game 1, do you move Joseph Gonzalez to game 2 so that you can avoid needing to use the bullpen for as long, knowing that you can bring a Skipper and a Burkhalter back in game 3 to close it out, like Auburn did for game 3 after Joseph Gonzalez went 8 against Mississippi State?
I mean, it makes sense. How big of an adjustment is that from weekend to weekend? Well, because South Carolina's this weekend, right?
South Carolina's this weekend. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I think the good thing here is you couldn't make that switch this week because you had a short week. You had a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, which, hot take, I like a Thursday through Saturday better than a Friday through Sunday. That's just me. I know Friday nights in the SEC are a thing. I just like a Thursday through Saturday. But anyway, I think that now having an extra day on the front end, you can make this change. And to me, it takes a little bit of pressure off Joseph Gonzalez, because he's gone in the last couple game 3s from either I have to win this for us to win the series, or like this last weekend, I have to win this so we don't get swept. And so now you take a guy who is pitching out of his mind right now, and you put him in that even lower pressure situation of game 2, and you got to feel pretty good about Auburn's ability. Now, whether the coaching staff does that or not, I don't know. I plan to ask that from Butch. We have 2 midweeks this week. We'll get 2 bits of media availability with them. I plan to ask him about, is that something they've discussed or something they want to do? Can't promise I'll get an answer out of him. He's He has been surprisingly candid at times, especially after the series. But that's definitely not something that I expect him to give us on the record right up front on Tuesday or Wednesday.
So let's talk about that. Okay. Butch is probably my favorite coach that I've ever gotten to cover. Like I have nothing but tremendous amounts of respect for Butch Thompson. Mm-hmm. And yes, I said that, and I've gotten to cover Bruce Pearl, but I love Butch Thompson's approach to his sport. Straight shooter, but also like super diplomatic about things. But he was asked by Brad Law in the Auburn Sports postgame show after Game 3 about, Brad kind of angled it from the, adversity angle of like, you're on the road, ton of rain delays throughout the series. It's got to feel good to, steal one at the end kind of thing. And Butch just calls out Mississippi State for how they handled all of it. And they were manipulative with what all they did. And it's really kind of let them have it.
Yeah. And the two big things that he directly cited in that conversation was, one, the lightning delay. They pulled the tarp back on the field. I think it was the 8th inning of Game 2 with the storm. I think the storm was about 50 miles away. And so they said, well, there's lightning in the area.
Butch said 75.
I'm sorry, 75. Yeah. There was, they were concerned it was close enough where they needed to stop everything, hard stop at the game. I mean, and they got that tarp out within minutes.
They were ready for it.
They were ready for it. And it's something where any momentum you may have possibly had was gone. And then pitching wise, now Auburn probably has to get a new reliever up because it's hard for a bullpen guy to sit for over an hour and then come back out and pitch again. And so he was unhappy about that. And then Game 3, the reason you see so many Game 3s at like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock is because the team checks out of the hotel that morning and they leave and go home after the game. And he talked about, we checked out of the hotel that morning and we were sitting around waiting to find out when we were going to play. And we're scattered all around because we don't have a hotel anymore. We don't have a conference room we can go to in a hotel. We're scattered all around between buses and other places because the game was supposed to be at 1. I believe first pitch ended up being 5 or 5:30.
Yeah.
And so, and the thing for Butch, like you alluded to, he's from Aberdeen, Mississippi. He's a local boy. He coached at Mississippi State, and he said, I'm very appreciative of my time here because if it was not for my time here, I would not be at Auburn.
Right.
But you could tell he was very disappointed with the gamesmanship that went into how the delays were set up and when start times were and when games were paused for weather, because he felt like it wasn't just let's have your guys play our guys. It's let's try to manipulate this to give our guys the best advantage we can. And that's just not the way Butch does things.
No, Butch wants to line up and beat you. He doesn't need any of that other stuff. And he'll take it when he gets beat, and he'll win with class when he beats you. And that's just who he is. And so I'm glad he's our coach, and I'm glad that he took that shot, because if he's saying that, it's probably closer to true than not. So like you said, two midweeks, and then take on South Carolina this weekend. And Lindsay will have all that coverage throughout the week at auburndaily.com. Lindsay, what else do we need to mention before we wrap up today?
Last thing is, with this series loss going 1-2, Auburn is still tied for second in the SEC West. Alabama and Tennessee finished up their series on Sunday. Tennessee won. And so Auburn is still tied for second with Texas A&M and Alabama. They hold the tiebreaker over Texas A&M since they won that series, and they will host Alabama at home. So Auburn still has a track to get one of those top 4 seeds in the SEC tournament and avoid the single elimination game.
That'd be huge. That would be huge. And so they can get that going this weekend, which is then it's Tennessee, right?
It's South Carolina. Then I believe it is. Yes, it is Tennessee. I am traveling out of town for that series. So I'm a little disappointed I'm not going to get to cover it. I'm not going to be able to watch it. I'll be out in Texas.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm a little glad I don't have to watch it.
Depends. It's going to be one way or the other for sure.
Exactly.
For sure. Lindsay, one more time, how can people find you, hear you, support you, all that stuff?
I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. You can follow my show on Twitter at Locked On Farm. You can subscribe to Locked On MLB Prospects wherever you get your podcasts. The writings at Auburn Daily, and the merch is at aushirts.com.
Yep. My writing is at auburndaily.com as well. And, of course, you can check everything out. Just search Locked On Auburn on any social media platform or on YouTube. We'll see you tomorrow right here on Locked On Auburn. See ya. Bye.